I'm Rabbi David Ben Eliyahu. I'm 60 years old, and I need to tell you something that no one in your family ever told you, because they didn't know it either. Every year, good people, generous people, loving people, lend money to someone they trust, a brother, a daughter, a lifelong friend, and they lose it. Not because the borrower was evil, not because the market collapsed, because they skipped one clause that Jewish law has required for 3,000 years, and almost no one uses it anymore. If you've ever lent money to someone you love, or if you ever plan to, comment right now, "I accept my wealth," because what I'm about to share could save your family from a disaster you never saw coming. Let me tell you what happened. I was born in Brooklyn, in a traditional Jewish household. My father was not wealthy, but he was disciplined. He taught me early, money is not evil, but carelessness with money is. I became a rabbi in my early 30s. For decades, I have counseled families, not just on faith, but on the places where faith and finances intersect. And I want to tell you something honestly. Most financial problems I have seen in families were not caused by greed. They were caused by misplaced trust, by the belief that love is enough, that loyalty is enough, that family doesn't need paperwork. You see, in Jewish tradition, we have a phrase, Al tivtach ba'atzmecha, do not trust in yourself alone. The rabbis were not speaking only about spiritual humility. They were speaking about human nature, about the way memory distorts, about the way generosity, when undocumented, becomes a gift, and gifts cannot be collected. Here is the thing. I have watched this pattern repeat itself for 30 years. A family member needs money. The lender has it. The lender loves the borrower, and so the lender gives. No paper, no witnesses, no structure, just a handshake and a heart full of hope. And I understand why. There is something in us that believes asking for paperwork is an insult, as if requiring documentation implies we expect betrayal. But here is what I have learned, and what Jewish law understood long before I did. Documentation is not a sign of distrust. It is a sign of love. It protects the borrower from the temptation of denial. It protects the lender from the helplessness of having no recourse. And it protects the relationship from the slow poison of disputed memory. When you lend without structure, you are not being generous. You are being reckless with your money and with your relationship. Now let me tell you about Moshe. I have changed certain details to protect his privacy, but the core of what happened is real. Moshe was one of the best men I have ever known. Honest, hard-working, faithful. He and his wife had spent 25 years building their savings carefully. They were not rich, but they were stable. And then one afternoon, Moshe's brother-in-law came to him with a problem, a business opportunity that needed $80,000 just to bridge a gap, Moshe was told, a short-term loan. He'll pay it back within the year. And Moshe, because he loved his wife's family, because he believed in the man, because he thought contracts were for strangers, said yes. He wrote a check. They shook hands. And that was it. No document, no witnesses, no structure, just love and a handshake. I remember Moshe telling me about it a few days later. He was calm. He was even a little proud. He said, "He's family, Rabbi. We don't need all that. 6 months later, Moshe was at my door. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw his face. He was not the same man who had sat in my kitchen months before, confident and warm. He was shaking. His hands were still. His eyes were flat. He sat down and told me what had happened. The brother-in-law had gone quiet. First it was delays. Then it was excuses. Then one evening the brother-in-law looked Moshe in the eye and said, "The money was a gift, not a loan, a gift." That Moshe had offered it freely, out of love, and that there was nothing to repay. Moshe was stunned. He tried to explain. He tried to remind him of the conversation, the terms, the agreement. But the brother-in-law was calm. He was unmoved. And Moshe had nothing in writing, not a single word. I sat across from him in my office, and I felt the weight of what was coming. I walked to my desk and I opened the drawer. I placed a document on the table in front of Moshe. It is called a shtar, a halachic lending contract. And I said, "Moshe, this is what was missing." The shtar is not a modern invention. It is not a Western legal instrument. It is an ancient document that Jewish law has required for thousands of years, and for good reason. It has several essential components. The first is the acknowledgement of debt, a written statement signed by the borrower confirming the exact amount borrowed and the nature of the agreement, a loan, not a gift. The second is witnesses, two individuals who can testify that the loan occurred under the stated terms. The third is the ribbit structure, ensuring the loan complies with the halachic prohibition on charging interest between Jews, which, if violated, renders the entire transaction spiritually compromised. And the fourth is repayment terms, clearly stated in writing with a timeline. Moshe looked at that document for a long time. Then he said very quietly, "Why didn't I know this?" And I had no good answer for him. Because the truth is, this wisdom exists. It has always existed. The Talmud is explicit on this. You do not lend without documentation. You do not trust memory. You do not trust even your own heart to recall correctly. And yet, somewhere in the last 100 years, we stopped teaching it. We started treating contracts as a sign of suspicion rather than a sign of wisdom, and families have been paying for that mistake ever since. Let me be specific with you, because I want you to understand exactly what was missing, not in abstract terms, but in concrete ones. If Moshe had used the shtar, or any equivalent written acknowledgement, here is what he would have had. He would have had the acknowledgement clause, a sentence in writing, signed by the borrower saying, "I, name, acknowledge that I have received $80,000 as a loan from Moshe's name on date, to be repaid in full by date." That sentence alone would have changed everything. Without it, the brother-in-law could claim anything. Without it, it was one man's memory against another's. He would also have had two witnesses. In halakhic law, a transaction without witnesses is a transaction that can be denied. The witnesses do not need to be lawyers or officials. They need to be two individuals of integrity who observe the agreement and can confirm it. And he would have had the ribbit structure, a simple clause ensuring the loan carried no interest and was therefore halachically clean, protecting both parties spiritually and legally. These three elements take 15 minutes to prepare, 15 minutes that would have protected 25 years of savings. Moshe did not have them, and so when the dispute came, he had nothing to stand on. We went to Beth Din together. For those who do not know, the Beth Din is a Jewish court, a panel of learned rabbis who adjudicate disputes according to halachic law. It is a serious process. It is a sacred process. And I sat in that room with Moshe, and I watched him try to tell his story. He was honest. He was clear. He described everything: the afternoon, the conversation, the terms, the handshake. And the brother-in-law sat across the table and told a different story, calmly, without flinching. He said it was a gift. He said Moshe had offered it voluntarily, out of love. He said there was no agreement of repayment. And when the Dayanim, the judges, asked for documentation, there was none. When they asked for witnesses, there were none. The ruling came down. Without documentation, without witnesses, without written acknowledgement, the court could not establish the terms of a loan. Moshe recovered nothing. I will never forget the look on his face when we walked out of that room. He was not angry. He was not even sad, not yet. He was simply empty. That evening I received a phone call from Moshe's wife. She was not calling to blame me. She was calling because she had nowhere else to turn. She told me that Moshe had come home and told her, and then he had sat at the kitchen table and could not speak. The $80,000, their savings, their buffer, their security, was gone. Not lost in a bad investment, not lost in a market crash. Gone because of one missing document. Gone because of the belief that love was enough. She cried on the phone, not from anger, but from grief. She said, "Rabbi, we trusted him. We trusted him completely." And I had nothing to say that could fix it. I told her I was sorry. I told her Moshe was a good man who had made a human mistake. And I hung up the phone and I sat in my chair for a long time. Because here is the truth. I had known this law my whole life. I had used it. I had taught it in private to families who came to me before lending. But I had never stood up publicly and said what needed to be said. That night I decided that had to change. Listen, Jewish law did not develop this requirement to be bureaucratic. The rabbis of the Talmud understood something about human nature that we prefer to ignore. They understood that memory is not neutral, that when money enters a relationship, the emotional stakes distort what each person remembers. The lender remembers a loan. The borrower over time begins to remember it differently, especially when repayment becomes painful. This is not wickedness. It is human psychology. The Torah understood this 2,000 years before behavioral finance had a name for it. And so the law says, document it. Protect the borrower from himself. Protect the lender from helplessness. And protect the relationship. Because a documented loan that is repaid is a transaction. An undocumented loan that is disputed is the end of a family. That is why the shtar exists, not because we assume the worst, but because we are realistic about what stress does to human beings. So let me tell you specifically what to do. If you are ever asked to lend money to a sibling, a child, a friend, anyone, before you write a single check, you do 4 things. First, prepare a written acknowledgement of debt. It does not need to be a legal contract. It needs to be a signed, dated statement from the borrower confirming the amount, the nature of the transaction, loan, not gift, and the agreed repayment terms. 1 page, 1 paragraph. It is enough. Second, Have two witnesses present when the agreement is made. Not hidden, not secret, present. Let them read it. Let them sign it. This is not suspicion. Explain it that way. Say, this protects both of us. Third, structure the loan ribbit-free. Do not charge interest. Do not create a situation that is halachically compromised. The spiritual corruption of a ribbit violation will cost you more than any interest you could gain. And fourth, keep a copy. Not in your phone, on paper, in a drawer, somewhere safe. Because if you ever need it, you will need it immediately. Here is what I want you to hear. Doing these things does not mean you love the person less. It means you love the relationship enough to protect it. The greatest act of generosity you can give a borrower is clarity, because clarity, documented and witnessed, is what keeps a loan from becoming a grudge. Moshe's story does not have to be yours. That is why I am here. If this teaching reached you today, then you still have time. You can make this decision now, before the moment comes, before someone you love is standing at your door asking for help, and you are tempted to say yes with nothing but your heart. Say yes, but say it with structure. Say yes, but say it wisely. Jewish law is not trying to make lending cold. It is trying to make it durable. So before you do anything else today, comment below, I accept my wealth. That is your declaration that you are choosing to protect what you build. Then subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because every week I share exactly this kind of teaching. Principles that are thousands of years old, applied to the financial realities you face right now. Like this video if it opened your eyes. Share it, please share it, with someone in your family or your community who is about to lend money without thinking twice, because maybe you can save them from what Moshe went through. There is a link in the description where you can submit your own story. If you have experienced something like this, or if you have a financial question rooted in faith and wisdom, send it to me. I read them. Your story matters. Wealth is built in silence, and it is lost in emotion, but it is protected, always, by structure. That is the oldest lesson in the book. Do not wait until you are sitting across from someone in a Beth Din with nothing in your hands. Document the loan. Protect the relationship. Love them enough to do it right. Shalom.